Hello.
Hi, Steven.
Hi. So all
Uh,
systems are firing, and we're a go for launch. Uh,
okay.
Sorry about that. I did the math wrong on the time, and so I was expecting you in an hour. Otherwise, I would have had my everything tested.
Oh, that's okay. Time zones can be complicated on that.
Yeah. Uh, I just never was good at math, which is why I had to go into magic, because everything in this world is math these days.
Yeah, and I don't do well with math.
Nope. All right, so when I cut this together, I've got a nice little song that we'll play before, and then I'll just jump right into where I'll cut in when the show starts with my intro.
Okay.
Okay, so here we go. Um, Hello, everyone, and welcome to X Media, The Words Behind the Walls, a show where we explore Neopaganism and all things magical and maybe things that aren't magical. We'll have to find out and see. My guest is, I'm sorry, I've already forgotten your last name.
Greer, Angel Greer.
Angel Greer, someone who is much more well known than me, so it's embarrassing that I flub your name right off the bat, but I do apologize for that. But part of what I want this show to be about is just finding people of all different sorts, and you seemed and still do seem like a very interesting person. Do you want to tell us a little about yourself, your background?
Okay. It's okay that you forgot my name.
Okay.
That's okay. A little bit about myself. I think I have a very outgoing personality. I'm pretty laid back, very earthbound when speaking to people. I can't say I don't judge because I am human, but
Right.
I'm very least likely to judge somebody
Right.
for their actions. I am married. I do have 4 children. My children are much older, though. They're 23, 20, 19, and 16.
Wow.
Yeah, I was a child bride,
Right.
so that's why I had my children so young. I am 39 years old. I am a Celtic witch, and I run a couple of groups.
Uh-huh.
My primary group is Pagans of the Past, and Pagans of the Past 2.0, where I teach paganism, and I have a lot of members in there as well that offer some great information. And every Monday night, I do a live feed inside my group to discuss different topics.
Oh, great.
The one coming up tomorrow will be discussing empaths, the traits of an empath.
Right. Okay. And that's and to get to the group, it's just a Facebook group, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the name of the group again?
Pagans of the Past 2.0.
Okay, so tomorrow, which will be the 17th, at what time do you go live?
5:30 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Okay, so definitely something to check out. And you said you had 2 other groups?
Yeah, I have a couple of them. I do have a survivors group for those that have lived through abuse. I have a bits and pieces pagan group, and that's for sellers and buyers of pagan merchandise.
Sure.
And then I have another group called the Pagan Poetry Corner, and it's for people that write. It's a small group. It's only about 300 of us. But people that write poetry, and it covers sometimes the dark side of life, sometimes light, different things that they go through. Some of it's pagan, some of it's not.
Right.
But people just like to write, so I kind of had that group just for the writers.
Sure, that's great. I actually will be seeking that out. I'm a writer myself, and I really found and became involved in paganism because of my love of art. Like, I think that if you look at art, it's one of the most obvious signs of that magic is real. The way that, a song can instantly change your mood. That's
Absolutely.
Aleister Crowley's definition of magic, which is the definition I use, is in the simplest way he put it was magic is the ability to cause an intended effect. So even if you just intend to tie your shoes and you do so successfully, you would call that a successful spell, because if you think of all the neurons that are firing and all the organs in your body that have to be functioning and move to get you down there and tying that shoe, it's very much like a magical ritual. And
I love that.
Yeah. So and with artwork, it can, for me, even with incantations and spells like that, I write all of my own, and oftentimes use them only once and move on from that. Do you write your own incantations if you use incantations?
I do, actually, and that actually is what started me into kind of writing poetry separately.
Sure.
Because when I started spell writing, I've always believed in chanting, and the chant for me is to build that intention instead of just saying, I'm going to do this, and then, whatever ritual you put with it. The enchanting puts the intent in it because you're putting the power behind it. I really want this to happen.
Exactly.
I'm really going to put my intentions into it. So the chanting kind of builds up to it and builds the power behind it. And I like to rhyme my chants the first and foremost is because I wanted to be able to do it without stumbling over it. Like when you write something down
Sure.
and you intend to chant it, you want to be able to say it clearly.
Right.
Well, then sometime after that, I want to say I was in my 20s, and I kind of played around with the words and started telling my story, doing it kind of in the same context, and that's where I kind of introduced myself to poetry. It started with incantations and chanting. So absolutely, I write my own.
And do you, I know you have had no preparation for this, but do you happen to have any of your poetry that you on hand that you'd like to read? Or?
I don't have anything on hand. I have everything saved, and it would honestly take me a minute to even put something together.
Okay, that's fine. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you never know. But yeah, I do the same thing. One of the most effective spells I ever cast, I was outside in the middle of a rainstorm, sitting at a picnic table, just writing frantically incantations based on tarot reading I was doing for based on the problem, but all of the incantations I wrote at the end I burnt to fuse the words with fire to try to create, bring it into new life. And that was just a really fantastic evening. There was lightning in the background and thunder, and I was like, wow, I feel like a real wizard today.
Right, that's beautiful.
Yeah. So you are practicing Wiccan?
No, I don't practice Wicca at all.
No, Wicca.
I did study it,
right,
only because when I was born into a pagan household. My parents, my aunts, my uncles, everybody was pagan, and I was being taught of the Celtic Druid lessons. That's what I grew up on.
Yes.
And when I was 16 years old, I was already, married. Like I said, I was a child bride, but I had moved in a roommate to help her out, and she was Wiccan. And I didn't even know at that time what Wiccan was.
Right.
So I was very curious. And in that case, I learned a lot from her about Wiccan, and in turn, I taught her things about the Druid path. And I came to the conclusion as I got older that Wiccan and Celtic are very similar. I mean, there are certain things that was added to Wiccan, to modernize it, I guess.
Right.
But they are. I consider the Wiccans in my group like our brothers and sisters, and there's slightly different rituals that they have, and the covens and the way that they do things.
Right.
But in reality, we are very much brothers and sisters on the pagan path.
Sure.
They just, have their own little thing.
Right. Well, and in my order, Order of Dying Light, where we self-fashioned our names as Technopagans, we have a very holistic view of magic where we don't believe in one right path. In fact, we specifically search out members that are all very different from each other because if going all the way back to one of the original stories of the Godhead, where at one point we were all supposedly one perfect eternal entity until this force struck us and scattered us across the universe. Later, that story was renamed the Big Bang. But the more that we bring different pieces together, the more we advance. People will say scientifically, but it's in a magical way, like the way of bringing flint and steel and banging them together to create a spark and create fire. It's just I find it fascinating how the more we find ways to combine different pieces of things from all over the world, the more we advance in terms of technology, which, again, I think technology is just magic that people have finally looked deep enough into to explain to their satisfaction.
I actually have a theory on that, if you wouldn't mind me sharing that with you.
No, not at all. I'd love to.
Okay, well, I kind of have a name for it, too, and I call it the Rubik's Cube. And I believe, in the studies that I have been through and the things that I've learned and done, that what we do now and the technology we do now, it's not really new. All of this stuff, even what we're doing right now, cell phone, Skype, all that, at one time, this kind of technology or sort of something like it existed. But with the way things have changed and the religious orders coming in and government taking over everything, and everybody was split up and everything was changed and everything was killed and smashed and slaughtered, we literally had to start all over again. And with what you basically just said is like what I put together as the Rubik's Cube. We're finding each other of different personalities, different magic, different information, and we're putting it back together. We're building the cube back together. We're making their technology stronger. We are making ourselves more powerful, and then we're blasting it out into the universe because we're projecting what we're putting together.
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent way of putting it, and I see a very similar type of thing. It's overwhelming. Like it certainly is. There's two camps in the people who believe in versions of the story of how once we were a whole piece and then we were scattered. There's those who believe that it's not possible to have a full reconnection back into that entity, and then there's those people like the Kabbalah who have their own version of the pathway to reintegration. But I just think that the very basic tenets of paganism, which I think most pagans believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, if your experience is different, but most believe that, at the very least, that everything has spirit and everything is interconnected. Like, aside, like, those two tenets seem to be the kind of a fundamental linking point to a bunch of very different practices.
I have to agree on that. I absolutely have to agree on that. There's, taking individual people, everybody's got a little bit different of a view of it, but when you put it together as a whole, the common factor is the spirit and the interconnecting of everything. And that's one of the reasons why we somehow managed to find each other, because we're projecting it out there, what we're looking for, what we're trying to connect to, and we're also drawing it in.
Right.
And that comes from having that connection.
Yeah. And I think there's moments in most people's lives of what most people call circumstance that is actually synchronicity, and where I think that the more that you follow the path that you're meant to be on, the more synchronicity starts to show up in your life, meaning, things that happen in your favor or that lead you in a different direction, that there's just too many things that had to come together all at once to create that experience, that calling it circumstance almost seems ridiculous, because it's just obvious that that particular combination of things at that time, like for me, that when I was originally recruited when I was 14 into the Order of Dying Light, I was a hardcore atheist. Like, they welcomed everybody who was, that was respectful of everyone's beliefs. And for the first 10 years that I practiced, I was an atheist, but I worked in the art section, and I saw, where they considered writing a story magic, I could do that and be considered a member. But then I had a very major catastrophe in my life that if 5 or 6 very unlikely things hadn't happened, I would have died. And but all these things came together, and they actually mirrored several things that I asked for when doing my meditations and incantations that I did simply as what I considered a psychological exercise. But when all those pieces came together, I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not an atheist anymore.
Right.
And but there is a famous quote, famous within our circle, that enlightenment is an experience, not an idea. Like, you can't tell someone about your near-death experience or tell them about a spell you cast and have them feel the same thing that you're feeling. And enlightenment is kind of like that, where you reach this point where everything suddenly becomes clear. I don't know if you've ever reached a level like that where you feel almost as if something is moving through you, and you have a very clear sense of what needs to be done.
I have well, the way I try to explain it in my group, and I'll be honest, I have a lot of people in the group that are new to paganism, and they come to it because they're trying to understand.
Sure.
And I have a lot that have been there, that have practiced for a long time, but don't really have a place they can go and meet with people or talk with people of the same path, and they're looking for that. But what I explain to them, or try to anyway, is what I call the awakening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's being enlightened, because no matter how I try to explain it, I will never be able to get them to feel it or know it until they're there.
Right.
I can honestly say I think that my true awakening, for a personal awakening and realizing everything around me, putting everything in the past, everything I've learned, everything I read about, everything that was drilled into me by my uncle, it happened when I was about 25. And it wasn't a near-death experience or anything like that, but I was in a moment of devastation because I was leaving my abusive partner, and I wanted to, at that point, part of my healing for what I was doing, the decisions I was making, was also finding my true self and opening up to everything. And I want to say it was more like stomping my foot, saying, damn it, this is what's going to happen now. I'm tired of everything, of the crap. And when I was able to reach that level, the feeling that came through me is like no other. Because when I say to somebody, I feel this, it goes deeper than they can understand. I feel it.
Exactly. And I think, there are some pagans who have turned their beliefs into a religion. The difference being that one, a religion expects all of its members to believe and practice the same things, and two, religion relies on faith rather than experience to argue that you should believe with them. In our order, we don't put too much stock in faith. We just follow these paths, and people experience the divine in their lives. They feel that touch at certain times when they're ready to, or they don't in this life. Maybe they're just supposed to be learning something else. But we don't ever say, this is how you are supposed to think, and you should do it simply because I tell you to. Even the Grand Masters practitioners in our group don't go that far.
What I try to tell people, is definition. Like, if you're going to use this word, or if you're going to use this phrasing, this is what it means, to give the knowledge of them. But I also want people to see themselves as an individual, so that whatever path they're on, they understand their own path. Not that they have to do it my way, because my way is, I'm just me. You be you, but this is what, this is what this means. Now what do you want to do with it?
Right.
And so what you're saying makes perfect sense to me.
Right. And I think, everybody is different. And magic is kind of an alchemy of external energies mixing with your own internal energy. And you're just going to have different reactions to those external energies depending on the person. The energy might not even be noticeable to some people, or maybe inaccessible to others, but there might be someone who can tap into that energy because there's just something inside them that clicks together, and they have good luck with that particular path. For me, it was the tarot cards, and that started off with using it for a lot of creative experiments. I used them a lot in writing to help come up with some twists and turns in my stories, and then they have so many different beautiful decks that you can kind of pick up and look at and make your own. And so that kind of was where I got started. I was how long have you been? So you were raised pagan,
Absolutely.
And were you raised? You still practice the what you learned as a child? You're still.
Oh, absolutely. I'm very active in it. from my own knowledge, I have studied other religions, and I've read, different books and stuff. When my children were real little, I had actually decided to dedicate them to a Baptist church. And the reason why, it was not because I wanted to raise them Christian, but because I wanted to give them an introduction to, okay, this is pagan, this is Christianity, and Christianity is a mainstream religion. I did not feel, as a parent, putting aside being pagan, but as a mom, I wanted my children to understand things that they will experience in life, things that will come about, and so that when they become of age to make a choice, they have the knowledge to do it with. I
was just going to say, and that goes, hand in hand with what I think some of the core tenets of paganism is that you figure out what needs to be done. It's like the four rules of the Sphinx that go to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silence. You first you decide, you figure out what needs to be done, and so you know that you need to accomplish something, and then you figure out the way to do it. And you, as long as it doesn't have to be a magic spell. It's just you use your will to follow through with what needs to be done, and you dare to complete that task. And I think exposing your kids to mainstream religion, especially at an early age, was a great idea. I'm blanking on the guy's name. He's a really famous writer for arguing for atheism. He had a famous book of essays called "Why I'm Not a Christian." And
I know who you're talking about. I don't know his name, but I can see his face.
Right.
I've watched a couple of his videos.
And and his kid ended up becoming a born-again Christian. And so it's like you don't, with paganism, I think we don't in general try to force our beliefs even on our kids if we're practicing what a lot of things preach. You don't want ignorance is not worth the price of the illusion of safety. But no, I was born and raised in the Mormon church until I was 12. I was baptized in there, and wow, that was a wacky experience, and certainly I'm really glad I was. It gave me a really vivid imagination, and the people were nice enough, and I managed to get out right before. Well, I was in there long enough to get the little booklet that the mom or dad gives you that's on masturbation, that goes on to say that every time you masturbate, you're murdering millions of potential souls that are waiting to come down from her.
Oh dear.
And and my cousin, who was a few years older than me, and he really took that seriously. And even after he left the church, he was saying how he always had this feeling of guilt when that hit, because that just struck a chord in him. And I just told him, yeah, it used to bother me too, but now when I'm finishing up, I just finish the strokes with dun dun dun. Another one bites the dust. And another one.
Oh God!
Another one.
I love that.
Another one bites the dust. And he laughed.
I love that.
Yeah, he said that got him past the guilt. So, I think humor is another very powerful source of spirit and magic.
It is. On that topic, raising my kids up in their teens and stuff. And it was, of course, something my boys ran into, and I remember my son, my oldest son. Now he's 20. He is Christian now, but that was he actually was crying in the bathroom, and after the whole thing, whatever. So I talked to him, you know, I was like, son, we're going to have a very mature conversation.
Right.
I know you're embarrassed, but here's the deal. You are growing. And this happens to both males and females, and it's part of being human. It's got nothing to do with faith. It's got nothing to do with religion. It's got everything to do with the human body grows. It produces. This is what happens.
Right.
You're perfectly normal. And, you know, I had to be serious with him because he was crying.
Right.
But, you know, now that he's a little bit older, we can cut up a joke here and there about it and make it kind of funny. But, you know, it is a sad thing. And the reality of it is how many young people experience such a thing and are bashed or embarrassed or, you know, guilty for being human.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we have, and I lived most of my life in Utah. I'm spending a year out in California right now, but Utah has the highest rate of teen homeless as well as teen suicide, because it's the policy of the Mormon Church that if your teen states that they're gay and they're unwilling to go to the camps to be fixed, then they're kicked out of the house. And so there's a huge community of gay teenagers living on the streets, and it's just ridiculous. You know, I know that the ancient pagans, you know, saw sex as a link to the divine. Do you have any particular thoughts on this? Is just kind of a segue from my depressing stats.
No, that's okay.
But do you find that sex is useful in magic at all? I know that was...
I do. Actually, no, it's okay. I'm very open. I do, actually, in a huge way. To put this out there real quick.
Sure.
You can't really define age. I mean, I would like for children to be of age mentally so they can understand what they are doing.
Right.
Unfortunately, the reality of it is between 14 and 15, when your body hits puberty, you're going to go and find what your body requires you to look for.
Right.
And I just hope that it's with somebody close to your age.
Right.
And we'll put that out there real quick. But sex in itself is sacred.
Sure.
And whether it be with somebody that you love or somebody that you built a mental communication with, you know, that mental connection with,
Sure.
and the one-time rendezvous, when you have that connection, as momentarily as it is, it makes you stronger. You're putting
Sure.
two powers together. You're uniting it. And for homosexuals, gay, bisexual, like myself, sexuality, it shouldn't matter on gender, because the act itself is sacred. And when two people couple, no matter what they are, male, female, whatever the case might be, when two people couple, they build a power. They make you stronger.
Sure.
Part of our magic is psychological. Part of our magic is physical.
Right.
And so sex itself is sacred.
I agree. And with that... I mentioned Aleister Crowley earlier. I'm not really a big follower of much of his work, but when I was first searching after my parents left the Mormon Church, and I began looking for something, and I started reading Paganism. Of course, all of his books were prominent in the bookstore, so I ended up reading them. But you know, he had a journal of his sexual magic experiments and their results, but he also included in it was a drug journal where he would try different combinations of drugs in an attempt to produce a magical effect. Do you think drugs have a place in magic, or are they the illusion of something happening?
To be truthful, I've definitely tried it. You know, just the knowledge to know what it's like to be intoxicated or having hallucinations, or, you know, just to get a feel for it.
Uh-huh.
And I do feel that when you're in that state of mind, because you are not so focused, you're let loose a little bit,
Right.
then you kind of let more in.
Sure.
But at the same time, depending on where your state of mind is how much are you letting in that you can hold on to, and how
Right.
much of it is just part of the high and it disappears.
Right.
I prefer to be completely sober when,
Sure.
if I'm going in deliberately, like I am going to intensify this ritual, that this magic, what my intentions are, because I can focus on it. I am very determined.
Right.
That's what I prefer personally, because I have tried it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do understand where others see, like, okay, well, if I do this, if I smoke a little bit of this or I drop a little bit of acid, that I will reach this plane. And for
Right.
those people that require that, I can understand it, because that's the only way that they're able to say, I'm letting go.
Right.
I want to learn. I'm ready.
Right.
It's hard to let go of what society throws at you
It's true.
unless you can relax.
There was actually a Nobel Prize winning mathematician. I saw him years ago on Larry King. I'm dating myself. I'm actually the same age as you. I'm 39. But he came on and he said that every time he ran into a problem that he just couldn't solve, that was, seemed impossible to solve, he'd write it down in a very specific journal, and once a year he'd take that journal up to the mountains and drop acid and work on the unsolvable problems. And one of those times led to the breakthrough that won him the Nobel Prize. So when he came on,
And that's beautiful.
Yeah, and that's really, if you think about it, people are practicing magic all the time. They just renamed it after the church started burning all of us for practicing it. So they took magic and renamed it to science. They took alchemy and renamed it to chemistry. They took the elements and expanded on that. Like you said, I believe you don't. The world is. It's interesting how things played out. I mean, Plato was the one who first invented atomic theory before they even, tens of thousands of years before they knew what, not tens, it would be thousands, before they even knew what an atom was. And it's interesting when you read Greek arguments, they basically talk, it seems as if in metaphor, but they almost are literal about combining their ideas about magic or gods with politics and math, and you read their arguments and it's just they draw from everything in life to show that there's patterns in everything, and that's how they argue their point. Like, look, it's here, it's present here, it's present here, and this is where we're at. One version I loved, I read recently, Greek philosopher, I can't remember his name, but he was pre-Socrates. He wrote, I don't know why we fear death when we die thousands of times every day. He said, the baby dies to become the child dies to become the man dies to become the old man. Why should we fear death when we've already gone through it so many times? I thought that was quite an interesting way to put it, because while I feel I have a core self to me that, despite everything I've been through, is still there, that was there when I was born, or at least soon after, I do see myself as a very different person than I was when I was younger. Do you
Absolutely. That's one of the things I teach my own children. Is like, what you know now at 16 will not be what you know at 26.
Right.
And then when you reach 36, it's an entirely different perception.
Right.
And we don't change who we are, but somewhere in those years and in every decade or so, our perception changes. And I think it changes because our experiences change, our understanding of other people. You know, what we think we know at 16 versus what we have learned at 36 is so dramatically different that, yes, I would agree.
Right.
We lose a part of that self, but we gain something else. This part dies, but this part is birthed, kind of like I want to say a phoenix.
Right. Yeah, that's it. And in the tarot, the sun card comes after the moon, and the moon is one of the crazier cards in the tarot, and in the Rider-Waite deck, it has an image of a child riding atop a horse with a big smile on his face, and behind him is a gray wall. Gray back then, or in the tarot, symbolizes the past, and behind that wall is a garden, and Rachel Pollack described it as saying that the garden was meant to be the Garden of Eden, and the child has finally freed himself from the prison of the myth of the Garden of Eden by discovering the truth that the Garden of Eden is within all of us, that we access it ourselves. And so he's emerging into the daylight with childlike joy, which may be even better than actual childlike joy, because having survived the nights and its terrors, the person is stronger than they were back then. I thought that was a really fascinating take on multiple levels, but when you say when you're 16, you don't know as much as you are when you're 39, but in a way that ignorance is necessary to be a 16-year-old and have the types of experiences that shape you. If you
right, absolutely.
Right. I think a 39-year-old, who got suddenly their brains Freaky Friday swapped into a 16-year-old's body and was expected to be content with their life, living as if they were a 16-year-old, would not benefit all that much. Maybe from getting a bit of a reminder of what it was like, blah blah. But for a normal 16-year-old, everything is the beginning or end of the world. And there's a great song by Nightwish called "I Want My Tears Back," and it's just singing about how they have been hurt so many times and whatnot that they no longer feel the rush for life that they used to, and they are jaded when it comes to love, and so they want to rewind all the times they cried and go back to being innocent enough to see the world as a brighter, more promising place than their age has brought them. And I think that you find that sense of loss a lot more outside of pagan cultures than inside, because we focus so much on continuing to live and grow in new ways and constantly renewing ourselves, while other religions, and I include atheism as a religion, just kind of be like, okay, I guess we're saying the same prayer again today, or
right.
So
I think the paganism part, where we're more open to it and not quite as not sure the word I want to use right there, but kind of adding on to what you said, I think it's because we believe that love continues.
Yes.
And not necessarily being in love with somebody, but being able to love another human and being able to know that, we're going to do what we can do and we're going to work through our way to tomorrow. And to where other religions, where they are so strict and so many rules and you are shamed for so many reasons, that when something devastating does come into their life between, say, 16 and 39, that they start to shut down because those other emotions come in, where when you awaken or you are enlightened and you understand that, okay, this was an experience,
right.
I can walk past it.
Exactly. And also the as Nietzsche called, Christians, not to bash on anybody's beliefs, but, I'll bash on the Christians because they killed enough of us during the Inquisition that they can take a slap or two, but Nietzsche referred to them as the worshippers of the grave. And it really is, it seems like religion is just about killing time until you get to die and go to heaven. They're not
right.
They're not looking for anything divine on earth, and by not looking, you don't find it. Again, I think magic is, or spirit, or whatever you want to call it, is a two-way street. And if people... It's ironic that so many people that are willing to give blind faith to wherever they happened to grow up are unwilling to explore any other possibility. But I guess, that's part of the job of organized religion, is to make sure you're only listening to them.
Right. One of the things I teach in the group, and I try to explain, is the heaven and hell aspect, because we do have a lot that are like converting.
Right.
And so I explain heaven and hell as a state of mind. And
right.
it actually helps a lot of people, because when they're taught from birth, or when their parents take them into this Christian religion, that, these are places. And so when you have that stuck in your head and it's bashed into your head, then it's really hard to come out of it. So I teach them, or explain anyway, that it is a state of mind. If you want heaven, then think about the things that are good and what you want. If you
right.
think about hell, it's, you've lost your home because of bad decisions, or you decided that you're going to go and party instead of go to work, and your life is in shambles. And you're making your own hell because of the decisions that you make.
Sure.
It's not a place that you're going to go to. And that actually helps people a lot that are alive. They can start living their life,
right.
realizing that this is not a place, this is the way they think.
Right.
So
and,
psychologically, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Psychologically, part of paganism, at least a huge part of it for me, is getting into somebody's head and, allowing them just, a person doesn't really need permission, but individually, sometimes you just have to say, hey, it's okay to think. It's
right.
okay to think outside the box. And that allows them to reassurance that, everything's okay, and they can make the decisions for their own life.
Right. Well, one proposed law of nature or magic goes, that which one gives energy to, one gives life to. And you see that, like, say, if someone cuts you off in traffic and you get so mad it looks like you're having a seizure as you're cursing. People, not everybody does that, but the people that do, the person who cut them off suddenly becomes this huge, powerful force in their life, even though they never touched them. It's the storm that the person has allowed to build inside them and has no outlet for, that causes all of this rage and anger to really
to build and manifest. Absolutely.
Sure.
Those are emotions that I can't say I don't go through them, but
Sure.
I'd rather not. You know, like, I'm human. Of course, I deal with it on occasion, but
Right.
for the most part, you know, I look at it as, well, okay, I'm not going to let that ruin my day,
Right.
and then go on, because I know how overwhelming anger can be. So overwhelming, and it can literally take over your life. And if one little thing in the morning, somebody cutting you off, has upset you so badly that the next small mishap, like a piece of paper gets lost or misplaced, your entire day has become ruined. Therefore, you are building your own hell.
Right.
And
with that, it's interesting. When they were doing the Rider-Waite deck initially, they were redoing the cards in order to they depicted, even though it had a ton of hidden pagan symbolism in it, the cards were depict a kind of Christian ideal. For example, they have a devil card when the devil really wasn't a part of pagan culture,
right.
and but in the devil card, they have, if you look at the original drawing, the two people who are chained to Lucifer, the man and the woman, the chains around their neck are loose enough that they could easily pull them up off their head and walk away, which the, you know, reading that card, you see it as the problem is being caused by the person's unwillingness to either forgive themselves, and they feel like they should be punished, or just their feeling of responsibility to something that's you know, chaining them down. But, you know, as like a literal attack, it's just basically saying, you know, people create their own hell, both in what they believe is going to happen after you die, and
absolutely,
you didn't. And, you know, we what I propose and what I teach my students, and I, you know, tell them in advance they can choose to agree with me or not, is that suffering is the truest evil that exists, maybe the only true evil. Like, even people who cause suffering, usually it's because of a cause and effect sequence that where they suffered or are suffering, and therefore they're bringing it about on others. In some cases, there's nothing to be done about it but to, you know, lock them up or stop them in some way because they're too far gone. But like, if you hear the stories of how most serial killers were raised, it's, you know, they went through tremendous suffering before they emerged as a monster. Again, that, you know, the negative energy that they're from the experiences that they went through as children just really warped their mind at the same time. And so we kind of see suffering as the true enemy, and we try to alleviate it wherever we can. I've volunteered a lot at battered women's shelters, and worked with a couple of people to get them out of some hard situations. And that's, I think, really I mean, but at the same time, the reason I'm able to do what I do is because I myself have gone through a tremendous amount of suffering, including losing my dad at a young age to cancer, and by being bipolar, going through massive number of shock treatments, and just really tons of terrible health issues. And yet I'm glad that I went through it, not even though I believe that I shouldn't, like, that the suffering shouldn't be around. There's just no use for it in a perfect world. But because I've gone through all of that, I know what to do when someone hits bottom. Like,
Right.
and I feel like, the people who go through struggles in their lives and whatnot, some of them break, but some of them, especially if they have a strong community, like a positive pagan influence, take that suffering and turn it into a weapon against suffering. Have you found that to be true at all? The tough times.
Oh, I have. I grew up, as I said earlier, that I grew up in a pagan home, but my mother was not a very good person in the reality, and I was sold into the child sex trade at 5 years old, and from 5 to 10, this was a very regular thing, and then from there, various foster homes, group homes, McLaren Hall, different places, different things have happened in all those places, and then the last time I was sold was at 16 to an older man that I married after only knowing a couple of weeks. In that time frame alone, just from, say, 5 to 16, I had so many heartbreaking experiences that I've seen other people completely break, lose their sanity over.
Yeah.
And I took those experiences with me today. There are things I wish I could forget, because I don't want to hold on to those memories.
Sure.
But at the same time, I don't harbor in them. Like, I don't live in those moments. I know that who I'm talking to right now is Stephen Harris. You're not somebody from my past that has done this, so I have no reason to be ill towards you. And where there's people that I know of throughout my life that they cannot separate this from this. So I feel like, not only having that capability, but it has brought me to where I could be awakened. It has brought me to where I can talk to people and kind of offer them some kind of guidance, because, the suffering, we don't want to live through that. It's horrible, but at the same time, it's brought me to where I'm at today. I can honestly say that I am a teacher. I can honestly say that I put hours and hours into helping other people and feel really good about it. And it's my pagan past. It's my suffering. But my suffering has also led me today where I'm smiling, I'm happy, and I'm on the phone with you.
Yeah. And same here. Like, it's a great thing, and by the way, we as far as the sex trafficking goes, we worked with, I don't know if you know who Kevin Smith is. He's a movie writer and director, and we helped him set up what he called the Wayne Foundation after Bruce Wayne, and it's a charity that is specifically for stomping out or going after the sex trafficking trade. So, yeah, I can't even imagine what you've been through, and the fact that you've turned that into a positive, and you've converted the energy into love for people rather than boiling up the pain and the hate. Like, I look at my scars, and instead of remembering the suffering, I force myself to just think, yep, that's another victory for me. That didn't kill me either.
Exactly.
And I believe that the problem of evil, as it's called in analytical philosophy, which is simply an argument against the Christian God, which goes, if God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-good, why is there suffering? And the best that people can come up with are either that this is a test, which doesn't make sense. If God's all-knowing, he already knows how it turns out. But the other one is that it's to mold us into better beings, which they probably just took from reincarnation and were like, oh, it's kind of like that. But again, God created us, so if he wanted a perfect being, we could have just been popped into existence as perfect beings without the need for suffering. So, like,
right.
I believe suffering is an unnecessary fact of life that should be stomped out. But in order to stomp it out, unfortunately, you have to get your hands dirty in it. But I do believe that in most cases you conquer it through joy and through love, in the way like Ray Bradbury ended Something Wicked This Way Comes. They defeat the evil carnival by laughing and dancing and cheering, and even though they didn't know if they were going to die or not, the father says, I won't let death take my pain and wear it as glad rags. I'll laugh until the end, and they end up bringing their friend back to life and going on. And it ends by saying, it was this perfect, beautiful moment, but the next year one of the kids will be going off to a different school, and pretty soon the dad won't be able to keep up with them when they run the race, because that's how they end the book. They run a race, but it was just like, but that's not now. Right now, everything is perfect, and what I was trying to get to was a sentiment expressed in a Ridley Scott film, and I'm blanking on the name, but Jeremy Irons' character says, just because something dies doesn't mean it never existed, which I would connect to the Dylan Thomas poem, though lovers be lost, love shall not, and death shall have no dominion. And that, is something I've focused on and concentrated on quite a bit since losing my wife. And do you think that emotions in themselves can, like, if someone is just feeling a powerful emotion, or I'm sorry, what I was trying to say was, do you think, well, I was just trying to transition, sorry, brain freeze.
It's okay, you're fine. It happens to me too.
And I have a bit of brain damage from the number of shock therapy treatments I've gone through, so occasionally I blank out. So let me just go to this question that a lot of people who are considering looking into our school asks is if magic, and also early students ask this a lot, is if magic is real, why doesn't the spell I cast the same way every time work the same way every time? And
okay.
Do you want to field that question?
Absolutely, because I get that question a lot too. And the way that I'd like to answer it, again, I'm all about individuality.
Sure.
And what I tell a person that asks a question like that is, one, what is your purpose for doing the spell, and why do you need to repeat it? Because if you are repeating it, then maybe it's a change that you need to make. And then the reason it doesn't work every time is because taking the magic out of it, the intent of the magic out of it, remembering that every human being has free will. And when you create magic and you're putting your intention out there, you're bending something to manipulate it in the direction that you want it to go in. And if doing so changes the thoughts of somebody else to doing something different, then your spell is not going to come out the same, because you're dealing with other people and their free will and what they also intend. If you are trying to create a spell, for example, a new person, it's usually finance or love. It's the two biggest things.
Sure.
And so the thing is that you need to break down the situation. If it's about love, let's look at the scenario. Let's look at the partner. Let's look at what you're wanting and what's really going on. If it's about finances, another job is the likeliness of the boss, CEO, coming into your job saying, hey, I want you to work for me. The likeliness is 0.01. It only happens in TV. So if you want this new job, if you want to change your financial situation, then yes, put the spell out there, put the intention out there, but also pay attention to what you're doing. What are you trying to do to make this happen? And it's not going to come out the same when, if you're not going to put the work into it, one, and two, if you're waiting for somebody else to make it happen for you.
Sure. And that touches kind of on what I say about it, which is the world is in constant flux. It's always changing. Like, we're sitting on atoms that are spinning around molecules, or electrons and neutrons that are spinning around atoms on a giant ball that's flying around a even bigger flaming ball. And so the energy in any given space and time is most likely going to be different. Like, what I would consider probably the first significant magic spell to be would be to be able to start a fire. And no matter how good you are at starting a fire, sometimes it's raining, and it just, like you said, when you're working, if you're trying to work magic on other people, that's got all sorts of problems in terms of their, like you said, free will and their own inner spirit, which is a magical force, whether they see it as that or not. And I also say, repetition tends to take the passion out of the ceremony, and so trying to use the same spell over and over again, it's like using anything over and over again. It wears out. Like, your car eventually breaks down the more you drive it. Our bodies eventually give out on us even. Why wouldn't magic follow the rules of everything else? Everything is constantly dying and being reborn, or born for the first time.
Absolutely.
But so as a druid, I practice shamanism quite a bit, and I saw I don't know if you're familiar with shamanism, like if you practice it at all. You are. I saw there was a book out that was supposed to be a combination of shamanism and druidism. Do you think that those two are compatible?
I do. I myself, I don't feel like the research that I have done and learned about shamanism, I don't feel that that is my direction for myself personally. I do see the connection in the healing and the divinations. Mm-hmm. A big part of druidry is the divination in getting in somebody else's life, in somebody else's spirit, and connecting them with the earth or what it is, that they're going for. Because the druid itself, and I say it because male or female, is a person that steps up to be a teacher and to help enlighten others. You can't actually enlighten them, but you can offer them a path and see if they take it and what happens to them. shaman, from what I understand, is more of a healer, and it's very emotional. It's physical. It's mental, and to a degree, I fully understand it. And to another degree, I think that it's a little bit more intense than what I have the capability for.
Right.
Not cutting myself short, but I see myself more as a verbal. Or,
right.
You see what I'm saying? Like, I know my current partner right now, my husband, he has this ability in his hands that's unfreaking believable. He can create heat in his hands, and you can see it happening, and he'll even start to sweat from his hands when he's doing it, and he can provide a healing by putting that heat on somebody else. And to me, that would be a characteristic of somebody on the shaman path. I don't have those capabilities.
Right. There's actually a great book on shamanism called Seeing in the Dark, and one of its first premises is that as a neo-shaman, you shouldn't attempt to copy another culture unless you happen to have a teacher who's well versed and who's invited you in. But it will be more effective if you take the kind of the various tools that shamans use and take the ones that work for you and make it into your own version of it. And like I have a lot of social anxiety, and I'm kind of an introvert, so I don't do the intense chanting or dancing around or things like that. But the journey work, where you close your eyes and you either are entering the worlds within you or external realities, depending on which version of shamanism you believe. My teacher, when I asked, when we journey, so is that just all in our head, or are we really supposedly leaving our body and going to these other realms? And his answer was both. So,
yeah.
And with that's more about self-exploration than anything else, and finding spirit allies or guides. But with Druidism, so how I'm unfamiliar with, like, do you have a simple example of a spell or magical practice?
Okay. Try to keep it simple here.
Sure.
It's not a ritual, really.
Right.
It's more like it's just a way of life, like we wake up in the morning and we put our pants on and go to the bathroom.
Right.
It's a part of being, and part of that being is, for example, and I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible, is waking up in the morning and that emotion that takes over some people that says, "Oh, it's Monday," instead of allowing that to come in, it's, I've lived to see another day. I've lived to learn more. I've lived to guide. I've lived, to take another step forward. And taking that knowledge every single morning to start the day with, as I am here, I have a purpose, and I'm going to make this happen. That's the very, very basics of it. Now, like spell work, that's individuality. That's your individual person. There are certain Druid covens. Mm-hmm. I personally believe that it's way too modernized by what I was raised on, because we're supposed to work together. We're supposed to come together and, put our powers together, become stronger. But you have to be an individual. You have to be Stephen. I have to be Angel. This is who we are. And so what I choose to do with myself on my spell work is depending on what I choose to do that day. Why am I going to do this?
Right.
But to the Druid path itself is very, very basically is waking up each and every morning and realizing I have a purpose.
Right.
You know, that there's no whining, crying about, oh, it's Monday. You know, it's Monday and I'm here.
Right.
And
so, like, a sense of gratitude would be a major part.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that is something that you share in common with shamanism, is to just be grateful for the experience and the way that you explain it, of like when you very first wake up. That's yet another thing science has stolen from the pagans. They're now talking about it's been around for a while, but cognitive behavioral psychology preaches that as well, and takes on the very much how you described it, of having a certain mindset and forcing yourself to stick to it. And it looks like we're at about an hour for the show. We can either continue, or we can, if you're ready to set back down to earth, then we can call it good here.
Well, I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed this discussion with you. If you have any more questions, I'm more than happy to continue.
Okay. So, you, with your writing group, you said that some of the members are mixing that with their magic. Is that right? Or is it just a... Go ahead.
The Pagan Poetry Corner, most of the members in there are members of Pagans of the Past, right. And this is just like a side group where they don't really hang out in all day, but if they have written something, the poetry could be a spell. Some of the poetry is a broken relationship, or, you know, just various things that people go through in life, and then they want to share it with the rest of the writers, or even looking for feedback on, okay, well, this is what I wrote. What do you think? Or, you know, sometimes it's a cry for help, and it comes out in poetry.
Sure.
So that, you know, that's pretty much what that is. And, it's a small group. It's not terribly active. Maybe one or two new poems go up a week, but everybody goes in to at least read them.
Right.
And, you know, keep up with what's going on, and then occasionally a new one will pop up from one of the members. The one of the other smaller groups that I have, Pagans Path Golden Shield, and that is for my abuse survivors group. I don't want to say I'm a teacher in that group, more or less just a support person, sure, because of what I've been through and then what, you know, others have been through.
Yeah.
And the other side of that is that it takes some of the members in Pagans of the Past that are going through this other stuff, and they can see me on the other side as I'm one of you. You know, I'm not anything higher. I'm not a divine light. Unfortunately, there are people that, okay, I created the group. Yes, I'm teaching what I know, but unfortunately, some people are looking for this guiding light or goddess, and they put me on such a high pedestal. And then I open up this other group, and I'm like, look, I'm just like you. Right. You know, we're on the same plane here. We're both human. This is the deal. Let's talk. And then they become more comfortable. Right. They realize, hey, you know, she is human too. So that's what that group is for. And then, like I said, the Bits and Pieces of Pagan Pride, that's a pretty good-sized group. It's got, I believe, 2,000 members in it. And it's people buying and selling from each other. I make it clear in the group that if there's a mishap where somebody doesn't send the merchandise or something like that, I will remove them and attempt to help the person that was taken advantage of, but it is an at your own risk deal.
Sure.
You know, sure. People that want to buy stuff from each other. I can't do much anything else. The primary group, Pagans of the Path, is where I spend hours in daily, answering questions or posting inspirational posts.
Sure.
talking to other people, and I don't run it by myself. I have 30-something people
Sure.
on an admin team that have the same or pretty similar mindset as to what should be going on in the group. It's a very friendly group. Every now and then we have somebody who's had a bad day, but we don't allow a lot of hatred. We don't allow a lot of ugly.
Sure.
And because the idea of it was, let's make it a sanctuary.
Exactly. Yeah.
If people come in that are Christian, they're asked, do not preach in here. This is not your place for preaching.
Right.
But you're welcome to come in if you want to learn what we do.
Sure.
We don't go to your churches and tell you to be pagan. Don't come in here and tell us to be Christian, but you're welcome to be here.
Right.
And with that, it allows pagans to have a place where they can talk about their various paths, their various beliefs, ask their various questions, and not feel like they're being bashed in the corner by a church.
Right. Yeah, and that's, it's commendable, just everything you're involved with. I'm really glad that I feel very fortunate that I just literally or seemingly stumbled over you as I was looking for interesting people, and I see paganism as at its finest. It's people coming together to help each other as a family, and then to help other people as best we can, if as much as we're able. And Ray Bradbury, to butcher and paraphrase what he said, was that happiness or life, and he was using life metaphorically, like feeling invigorated and alive. He said life is not a privilege, it's a right. Our bodies demand certain actions in exchange for its gift of animation. And you certainly, from, I think, having both a writing group and battered or survivors group connected within your network is a brilliant combination that I never thought to, when I was working in the main section of the Order of Dying Light, which has quite a few grandmasters that oversee it, and I was one of them until I took a volunteer gig to go and start a smaller group of people, just because sometimes we get sent out to do little jobs or be a part of a bigger job. But I never thought, even though one of my finest moments was helping a woman who had read one of my short stories that I had just posted on the not even on the pagan page I was on. I just posted it on a creative writing site, and she wrote me and was like, I feel like you're the only person who understands what I'm going through, and could I call you and talk to you? And at the time she was 42, and I wrote back, I'm 16, right? You really want marital advice from a 16-year-old? And she still did. She was just like, it will probably be awkward at first, but your story just tells me that I need to talk to you. And she was married to this alcoholic, just viciously abusive guy, and was asking for advice, and I had never even kissed a girl at that point, but I had written my share of love stories, and
right.
And also I had been involved with Order of Dying Light for 2 years, and so I kind of used what they suggest, which was, is there anything in life that you love that you could be more a part of than you are right now, that you could put yourself into? And she said, well, I used to garden, but I've become so depressed it's become overgrown by weeds. And I said, and after a long, nice discussion, I was just like, you should definitely start getting into gardening again. And I also brought her in as an initiate to our order so she could get further support with that. And the herbalists really took her in and gave her advice on what to grow and how to sell it online so she could stash money away in her savings, which she eventually used to leave the guy and move to Canada. And she stayed with one of our other members, and they started a store selling herbs for pagan purposes, and it's still going strong. And but the really crazy thing was this guy had so many drunk driving problems, like he wasn't allowed to drive anymore. He didn't have a license. It had been revoked. And yet somehow, we still don't know why, he got her address, and he tracked her down after several years. And when he was driving to her apartment, or I guess it was a small house, she said he was stone cold sober, and as he was about 2 miles from her place, he was going through an intersection, and a drunk driver ran the light and killed him instantly on impact. And in the back of his car, they found a shotgun and 2 pistols. She PS'd the story by saying, by the way, I've been keeping the various incantations wrapped in rue under my doormat, which I don't know if you're familiar enough with herbalism to know rue where they get the phrase, you'll rue the day you tried to hurt me. And so she kind of used it as creating a mirror spell so that it didn't activate after the pain was caused, but if negative energy was coming her way, to try to reflect it back. And of course they were always cleansing the place with smudge sticks and things like that. So it was a crazy story, and to go through that, it happened over the course of 3 years. So by the time her husband was killed, I was 19. But she sends me a big bag of free herbs every now and again, trying to get me to get into herbalism more. And I'm just like, just send the catnip, because my cat really loves that. I'm like, she says you've got some really high quality shit, and she needs some more, because the local grown stuff is just not going to do it. Do you have any animals?
I do. We have 3 dogs in the house. I love my dogs.
Oh, yeah.
I do like cats, but I have, and this is funny because I went to visit a neighbor, moved in recently, and she had 2 cats, and she goes, he really likes you. And I said, the problem is that every time I pick up a cat, they bite my face. And she looked at me funny, but, he was wanting attention, so I picked him up, and he cuddled to my neck like cats do, and not hard or anything, but he reached up and bit me on the face. And she's like, why did he do that? I've never seen that before. I said, cats do that to me. Right. Everyone I've ever been met with. And they've never, broken skin or anything, but they bite my face. Right. And so because of that reason, I don't own cats. I don't know. That's kind of weird. I do love my dog, though.
Yeah, dogs are great. I'd be interested to see how my cat would respond to you, because she was a rescue and I don't know what happened to her, but she's so shy and gentle that she would never defend herself against the other cats, and so in the shelter, so they had to keep her with the kittens. And when I got her, she just immediately wrapped herself in my arms and was like, "Going home with you." So I was like, "Okay." And but she never will extend her claws for any reason. When I lived in an apartment with a deck, I had a bunch of bird feeders, and she could go and sit out on the deck with literally, at least 100 birds walking all around her, eating and stuff, and she would just watch them and try to imitate their chirps, going "ma, ma."
That's so cute.
Yeah, so she's never scratched or bitten anybody, including a time another cat attacked her. She just went all Gandhi on the dude and was just like, peaceful protest, peaceful protest. Do you work with elementalism at all, like the four elements?
Oh, absolutely. I call on the elements often. I have a gift, and I guess it's the only word I can use. I don't know how else to describe it. Sure. But I've noticed this when I was young, and as I've gotten older, because I'm more aware of it, I take advantage of it. But I can feel the earth. And what I mean by that, as example, is I went outside, and I feel like a vibration. It's a real light vibration, not like an earthquake, but an energy. And for example, a couple months ago, I went outside and the vibration was different. And I knew that something close to me had passed on. And I stepped up a few feet, and a bird had passed in my yard. So I removed the bird, took care of the situation. Right. And I draw from fire. Mm-hmm. I feel air, and I'm drawn to water. I'm trying to explain this without sounding like I belong in an asylum, okay?
No, but this is the asylum, baby. You're already here.
Okay. I try to explain feeling on a level that others will understand, because so many people don't. Sure. But it is very, very intense, and it's the air or wind blowing through my hair or on my back. It's so sensual, it's almost sexual. Right. And then because I can feel the vibrations in the earth when I'm working with magic and I'm standing by fire, I can draw from it. Like I can feel the power in it and pull it into myself. And when things are bad for me, like I'm just not feeling good, or the situation has got me down for a minute, I'm drawn to jump in the water. The water calms me. It cleanses me. It makes me feel better.
Oh, so, I do the exact same thing, yeah.
So understanding those connections to the elements, I definitely call on the elements a lot. And that's part of the awakening I try to explain to other people when they complain about, oh, the rain this, oh, the mud that. And it's like, you just don't understand. We are connected to these things. Right. And when you can feel these things and truly understand them, they are in everything that we do and everything that we are. So absolutely, I work with the elements because they are my reason for living. Right.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I was always drawn to the idea, but originally I was placed into tarot studies and the creative writing classes. But once you get into advanced tarot magic, you have to get into elementalism, which I had wanted to for quite some time. And now I'll do things where if I'm trying to make like something physical manifest, I'll go outside with my bare feet and stand in the dirt, and I create I imagine roots growing out of my feet and down into the earth until I can actually feel the sensation of it. And I ask the earth to help me manifest this or that. I do a different ritual every time, that just by kind of filling out the energy and the vibes in the air. But yeah, I definitely have the same kind of relationship with water. I have all these past life memories of being a siren who and they may just be dreams or whatever, but in certain beliefs with sirens, they are immortal beings unless one marries a mortal, in which case she becomes mortal and starts down the path of mortals going through multiple lifespans. And so whenever I'm like, again, I'm bipolar, and I used to be severely suicidal, and I'd cut myself because I couldn't tolerate the pain. But now I just go and turn the shower on full on cold, and I put my head under it until I can connect with the water so much that the cold doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
And I was also born on the February 19th, which is the cusp of Pisces and Aquarius. So you've got the dreamer and then the water carrier who brings the message of the dreams down, and that fact was actually what got my recruiter to convince the Order of Dying Light to let someone in who was so young, because it was still a fairly new organization. It was a group that was originally formed by this mathematician who believed that the internet was the biggest leap into chaos that mankind has ever taken, and he felt the need to start an order of pagans who were specifically monitoring online activities, which is why we started using for slang the term Technopagan. But do you think that the internet has helped or hurt the pagan cause? Because it certainly allows for a lot more like new age, foot half in, foot half out people to kind of water down some of the information.
There's good and bad to it.
Sure.
I'll explain the bad first, and I call them the internet pagans. And basically, these are people that are not pagan at all. I mean, they live these lives where they go to church and they do these worships and all this other stuff with their families and friends and whatnot.
Right.
But they join these pagan groups and they basically talk out their asshole. You know,
Right.
and it's really just to be annoying more than anything.
Right.
But then they will swear that they're pagan and then ask something stupid. They say that they say there's no such thing as a stupid question, but I've seen some stupid questions.
There's very stupid questions, yes. Or maybe there's no such thing as stupid questions, just stupid people.
Right, there you go. So you have that, and then where it's been helpful is because there's so many people that reach their enlightenment and they're so alone.
Right.
You know, and I'm going to say we because I'm included in this. We feel crazy.
Yeah.
You know, the rest of the world is, you know, they can't see these things. They can't feel these things. They don't know these things. And when you try to explain, you know, that you've been touched by spirit, or you're hearing a voice talking to you, or something's just walked into the room, or you try to explain the connection to the elements, and you're looked at like you just climbed out from under a rock.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's a lonely place to be. So, and that way it's helped because it's helped people feel like, you know what, I'm okay. I'm not, you know, insane. I don't need to be locked up.
Sure.
The other side of that same coin, though, on the positive side of that, though, it also makes it horrendous because some of these newer pagans, putting age aside. It doesn't matter if they're 20 or if they're 65. They come in with these ridiculous ideas that they can take a word that means one thing and they can change it and say, oh, well, it means this because I'm pagan and pagans can do anything. Right. And it's like, no, not quite.
Right.
Like, you don't just get to wake up in the morning and decipher the dictionary to your terms, you know?
Right.
And I use the example, like, and we'll go back to math on this, but I'll make it simple. You know, there was a teacher that had disciplined a child by, and it wasn't even discipline, but explain to the child, you know, this is a bad mark on your math page because 2 + 2 = 4. And the child insists that it's 7. Right. So then the child goes home to mom and dad and crying because the teacher gave him a bad mark. So then the parents go back to the teacher and tell the teacher, well, we're letting him express who he is.
Right.
And so I tell people in the group, like, look, 2 + 2 = fucking 4. I don't care if you're pagan or not. It's not 7.
Right. Right.
And so, yes, it has helped, but at the same time, it's brought out stupidity in people that's unreal. You just cannot make 2 + 2 = 7 and say that it's true because you're pagan. Right. It's just not right.
Well, it's ironic because the serious practitioners of the art mostly tend to be, like you said, embarrassed or frustrated trying to and feeling disconnected from others, and yet at the same time we have this army of using pagan as a fashion rather than as an actual lifestyle practice. And so the real ones are like quiet and in the background, you know, working and stuff, and then you've got all these this plague of people who just ask the most inane, repetitive, you know, crap over and over again. And then you have the sellers who prey on that, and they're just like, yeah, buy my money spell for $50 and stuff like that. So, it's just like, is it a money spell that works for you? Is that
right? Because I just give you $50 here.
Right. So,
it's a scary world when you look at it like that. But yeah, it's become a fashion, and the fashion is what bothers me.
Yeah.
I have some of my admins, like my best friend Ricky. He's in the group and he helps me out a lot. But there's days when he has to walk away and not come back for about a week. And the reason why is because he gets very, very upset with the questions and the things that these people say. And, well, I've been pagan for 35 years, and my spirit animal is a cat that I found on my porch. First of all, spirit was the key word in that.
Right. was the cat dead on your corpse? Or
right.
On your porch?
Come on here. So, you know, he has to walk away because he's going to go cussing mad at somebody.
Right.
And I have Matt Dewey, who's another one that works in the group. I call him my strong arm because as lenient as I try to be, and I say lenient because I have a list of rules I want people to follow. But I tell them, okay, you broke this rule, you know, get your shit together, don't do it again. Right. Where Matt comes in and he's like, no, fuck it. You're an asshole, get out.
Right. Yeah.
So it takes a mix of us to work with these people.
Right. Yeah. And I don't get how they maintain that lifestyle because you would think after casting so many money and love spells that are obviously not working because there's always customers for that crap. You'd think they might figure out that there's either nothing there or there's it's a bit more complex than rubbing some oil in your hands and you know, and some on top of your head to unite you with the riches. There was a funny play on people who are, you know, after money spells in the book. what was it? On a Pale Horse by Piers Anthony, and it's a science fiction fantasy story, and it takes place in the future, but there's also magic is real. Like you can either take an airplane or a flying carpet to your destination. And the lead character is down on his luck, and he is kind of conned into getting this money-finding stone. And it's like how it works is whenever you command it to find money, the little glowing star in the center of it leaves the stone and moves to the closest available money, meaning, not someone's wallet or anything, but just like money that's free to take. And he realizes as he starts to use it that each time he activates it, it will move to like a battered nickel that got jammed in between a sidewalk, or a penny, or
right.
And so he's just kind of using this money spell, and he realizes, oh, fuck, I just got conned. Man, I was gonna ask you something. I just so yeah, I with the pagans that are like, I've been pagan for 30 years or whatnot, I always am like, oh really, that's awesome, why don't we get together and start working on something to help people and animals or nature or whatever. Like what have you used your abilities for? Because again, I was the part of my respect and reason I stayed with the Order of Dying Light for so long is because while half of it is scholar based and trying to push magic to its limits and find new ways of doing things and just studying and teaching, the other half is an activist group. We defended a major transgender site from this constant harassment that they were getting, spammed by a group of people who just were mainly like teenagers and things like that, but there ended up being a suicide on one of those sites because of the harassment. And
oh man.
So I always like, especially like with people, I just, it always blows me away when I show up to a page and I'm just kind of like, is anybody actually trying to push their knowledge base on magic, or is anybody interested in seeing if there's some folks we can help out, either through magic or through just simple kindness, but or even just asking difficult questions, and people are just like, man, my patron god is Neptune, and I've got a bong that's shaped like a naked lady. So I'm good. I'm good. My bracelet is made out of hemp, and so I think I'm good, bro. I've got the Tai Chi going with my futon, and I don't know about this whole helping people or discussing the various problems in it. So I just can't believe how many there are of those people. It's just, but fortunately, I didn't stumble on one of those peoples. I stumbled on you, and you've been a delight. It looks like we're reaching our second hour, so we should probably cut the episode.
I gotta get ready to make dinner.
Okay, and let me just end it with, just to dedicate the beginning of this for good luck, I'll end it with Byron's dedication at the beginning of his life's work, House of Leaves, or Leaves of Grass, he wrote, "To those who, by the dint of glass and vapor, discover stars and sail in the wind's eye." So for those listening, if that's you, then keep listening because this show's for you, I guess.
That's cool.
Thank you again, Angel. I actually managed to remember the name for a full 2 hours, so that might be a first for me. But I will get this up in the later this evening, and I'll get a link to you. Do you have an email address you want me to send it to, or should I just contact you? Oh, I can just send it to you through Messenger. Never mind.
Yeah, Messengers be fine.
Okay. So thanks again for coming on, and it's been a pleasure. I hope to be seeing you definitely on your writing site. I'm going to check that out, and hopefully others will too, the various communities you've got going. Do you want to list them one more time just so people...
Absolutely. And real quick before I list them, thank you so much for contacting me. It's been a great pleasure to speak to you.
Sure.
The groups are Pagans of the Path 2.0. That's the primary pagan page. It is a sanctuary. My subgroups are Pagans Poetry Corner, Bits and Pieces of Pagan Pride, and Pagan's Path Golden Shield. Each one has their own purpose. The primary group, of course, is learning and teaching paganism. The Poetry Corner is to share your writing and read from others. The Bits and Pieces of Pagan Pride is to buy and sell pagan merchandise. And then Pagan's Path Golden Shield is a survivors group, survivor support group.
Great. And so you heard it, folks. You know where to go to get your paganism on. So I guess that's it for us. And you have a wonderful evening. I hope your dinner turns out well.
Thank you. You have a great night.
You too. Bye.